We often believe our homes are fortresses, impenetrable sanctuaries where the outside world cannot touch us. But sometimes the danger is already inside. Welcome to the darkness, where your safety is just a fragile illusion. Tonight on Shadow Tales Teller, we explore true horror. These 3 true stories were sent in by viewers who survived the terrifying realization that they were being watched within their own walls. From mysterious fingerprints to phone calls echoing from the next room. These encounters will make you check your locks twice tonight. Let us begin with our first tale, a chilling reminder that newfound independence can quickly turn into a nightmare of paranoia and fear. At 19 years old, I finally moved out of my parents' house, eager to taste the sweet freedom of living on my own. It was a modest place, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I felt like an adult, ready to take on the world. One Friday night, I decided to celebrate my new independence. I called up my best friend, Sammy, to go hit the local bars. We drank way too much that night, letting loose and enjoying the carefree spirit of youth without a worry in the world. By the time I stumbled back to my apartment, it was well past 2 in the morning, and my head was spinning violently. I barely managed to unlock the door, my coordination failing me. All I wanted was to collapse into my bed and sleep forever. I didn't even bother changing my clothes or brushing my teeth. I just hit the mattress and passed out almost instantly from exhaustion. Sometime later, I woke up. My mouth was dry as a desert, and a pounding headache reminded me of my poor choices. I sat up, needing water desperately. The room was dark, but my eyes had adjusted enough to see the outline of the door. That was when I saw it. Something that made my blood run cold and froze the breath right in my dry throat. High up on the doorframe, near the top corner, were 2 pale hands gripping the wood, as if someone was hanging there. I blinked rapidly, thinking it was a trick of the light or a hallucination from the alcohol still coursing through my system. But the image didn't fade. The fingers looked so real, pressing into the wood. Yet there was no body attached to them visible. Terrified and drunk, I convinced myself I was seeing things. I pulled the covers over my head and forced myself back to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was shining bright. The fear of the night felt silly and distant in the daylight. I laughed at myself for being so paranoid. I walked towards the door, ready to get some coffee and cure my hangover. But as I passed the threshold, something caught my eye. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart skipping a beat in my chest. I looked up at the top corner of the frame. There, clear as day against the white paint, was the evidence of my horror. Distinct, dirty smudges. Fingerprints. They were in the exact position where I had seen the pale hands clinging in the darkness. It wasn't a dream. Someone had been there. Someone had been hanging above my doorway, watching me sleep in my drunken state. My mind raced. How long were they there? Did they come in while I was passed out? Were they still in the apartment? I grabbed a baseball bat and searched every inch of the apartment. Under the bed, in the closets, behind the shower curtain. Nothing. Then I found it. The living room window was unlocked and slightly ajar. I must have forgotten to check it before I left. There were scratches on the sill. Someone had climbed in. They had been inside with me while I was completely vulnerable and unconscious. I called the police immediately. They came and took a report, dusted for prints, but told me there wasn't much they could do. They confirmed the prints were fresh and didn't match mine, but without a suspect in the system, it was a dead end. I couldn't stay there another night. I broke my lease, paid the penalty, and moved back in with my parents that same afternoon. To this day, I wonder who it was and why did they just watch? Why hang from the doorframe like a spider? The image of those pale hands gripping the wood haunts my nightmares. I never sleep with the bedroom door open anymore. Never. That was just the beginning. Our next story takes us deeper into the fear of the unknown, where technology becomes a tool for terror. Imagine being home alone, your sanctuary, when the phone rings. You expect a friend, a family member, or maybe a telemarketer. But what if the person on the other end isn't calling from miles away? What if they are much closer than you think? Our second story comes from a young man who spent a lot of time alone. He enjoyed the solitude until one fateful evening. I was downstairs, eating dinner and watching reruns of my favorite sitcom. It was a routine Tuesday night, quiet and uneventful. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it. No caller ID. I usually ignore these, assuming it's spam or a wrong number. I declined the call and went back to my show. But 10 seconds later, it rang again. Same lack of identification. This happened 3 more times. Finally, annoyed and wanting it to stop, I picked up the phone and pressed it to my ear. I answered aggressively. Hello? Who is this? Expecting a prankster or a bot. But there was no voice on the other end. Instead of a voice, I heard a strange, familiar sound. It was like a distorted echo, a laugh track, and some dialogue. I frowned. The sound coming through the phone speaker sounded exactly like the show I was watching on my TV right now. To test my theory, I hit the mute button on the remote. The room fell silent, and terrifyingly, so did the phone. There was absolute silence on both ends. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. I slowly pressed the unmute button as the TV audio returned. The sound on the phone came back instantly, perfectly synced. The caller was listening to my TV. Panic set in. The caller wasn't just nearby. They were close enough to hear my TV clearly. They were inside the house. I hung up and quietly moved to the kitchen. I grabbed a knife, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I hid in the small closet under the stairs. I texted my uncle, who was a police officer and lived just blocks away. I told him someone was in the house. He replied instantly that he was on his way and had already radioed for backup. As I waited in the dark, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate creaking on the floorboards directly above my head. They were upstairs. They must have been on the extension line in my parents' bedroom. They had been there the whole time. It felt like hours, but it was only minutes before I heard sirens and the screeching of tires in the driveway. The police stormed in. I heard shouting, doors banging, and heavy boots running through the house. I finally crawled out of hiding. They didn't find anyone inside. The back door was wide open. The intruder had slipped out the moment they heard the sirens. But they found something. A burner phone left on the floor of the upstairs bedroom. It was the phone used to call me. They analyzed the phone. There were photos of me sleeping, photos of me watching TV, and one photo of the intruder. It was a guy I went to high school with, someone I barely spoke to. He had been living in my attic for days. The police found a nest in the attic, sleeping bag, food wrappers, and a direct view down into the hallway through a vent. They caught him a few blocks away. He never explained why. He just smiled when they asked him about the phone calls. I moved out the next day. The thought of him watching me, living above me, breathing the same air, it broke me. If your phone rings and there's no ID, maybe don't answer. Or better yet, check your attic before you go to sleep. We have reached our final tale. This one explores the vulnerability of sleep and the horrors that can hide in plain sight. It was a cold winter night. A group of friends gathered at Cody's house for a party that would last until the early hours. I was the designated driver, but I ended up staying late. Cody offered me a place to crash so I wouldn't drive tired. The bedrooms were full, so I volunteered to take the couch in the finished basement. It seemed like a quiet place to rest. The basement was large and shadowy. I turned off the TV, flopped onto the couch, and drifted off into a deep sleep. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but you know that feeling, the primal instinct that tells you you're not alone? I woke up with a start, my heart racing. The air felt heavy. I lay perfectly still, straining my ears for any sound. My eyes scanned the room. At first, I saw nothing but shadows. Then my gaze landed on the far corner of the basement. There was a dark shape standing there. A black mass. Too tall to be a piece of furniture. Too still to be a shadow. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a coat rack, a pile of laundry. But then the shape shifted ever so slightly. A car drove by outside, and the headlights swept across the room. For a split second, the corner was illuminated. I saw him. A man. Standing perfectly still, arms at his sides, staring directly at me. He wasn't one of the party guests. Terror flooded my veins. I instinctively closed my eyes and regulated my breathing, pretending I was still fast asleep. I heard him move. Soft footsteps on the carpet. He was coming closer. I could feel his presence looming over me. He stopped right beside the couch. I could hear his breathing. It was ragged and wet. He was standing inches from my face. I prayed he wouldn't touch me. I prayed he would just leave. Minutes felt like hours as he just stood there, watching. Finally, he turned. I heard him walk away towards the stairs. He was going up to where everyone else was sleeping. I waited until he was halfway up the stairs. Then I made my move. I knew I couldn't let him get to my friends. I silently bolted for the basement exit door. I burst out into the cold night air and ran to the front of the house. I started banging on the front door and screaming, waking up the entire neighborhood. I wanted to scare him off. Lights flickered on. My friends rushed to the door, confused and scared. I told them there was a man inside. We called the police and waited outside. They searched the house from top to bottom, including the basement where I had slept. They found a broken window in the back. The man had escaped before they arrived. But they found something else in the basement. Under the couch, right where my head had been resting, they found a large rusted knife. He had placed it there. Why did he leave it? Was it a threat, a warning? Or did he plan to use it and changed his mind? I shudder to think what would have happened if I had opened my eyes a second earlier, or if I had confronted him. He was watching me sleep. He was armed. And he was just waiting. That image will never leave my mind. These stories remind us that the boundaries between safety and danger are thinner than we think. We are never truly alone. From the hands gripping the doorframe to the caller inside the house, to the watcher in the dark. Evil has many faces, so tonight before you close your eyes, take a moment, check your windows, lock your doors, and maybe leave a light on. If you have a story of your own, share it in the comments. We are always listening and we are always watching. Thank you for braving the darkness with us tonight. Remember to subscribe to Shadow Tales Teller. Sleep well and lock your doors. Good night.